lessons from a client's ERP implementation, how Rimini Street is extending support for SAP, and whether or not your company can survive a cyber attack. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 227 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 227. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And this is the tech agnostic podcast that focuses on all things related to digital transformation, including strategy, people, process, and technology. Joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm excited for today's show. We are going to get into a bunch of fun stuff. First of all, we'll get into some questions we've received on social media. We'll provide our take on those questions. And then we'll get into some newsworthy topics. We'll talk about Rimini Street and how they're extending support for SAP through, I believe it's 2040. And then we'll also get into Apple's AI warning. And then later in the show, we're going to have a client on our show. His name is Seth Morth, and he was our counterpart at a client called Clair Global. And they are a worldwide live event production company. So they provide all the logistics and the construction, the manufacturing, and logistical management of concerts and events, live events throughout the world. And we recently helped them with their ERP evaluation, selection, and implementation. He's going to be on the show talking about some of the lessons from that whole process, the good, the bad, the ugly, and some of the lessons learned that you could take forward with your digital transformation. And then last but not least, later in the show, after Seth joins us, we're going to talk about whether or not your company can survive a cyber attack. That's actually going to be a keynote presentation I gave at a recent conference. We're going to play you a clip from that, or actually the actual presentation from the conference where I talk about cybersecurity there. So lots to cover here today. But before we jump into our newsworthy topic and guest here today, Darian, what are some of the social media questions we've received recently?
Yeah, this first one is kind of like a two-part question. The first part of the question is, what is the current top 5 solutions you're recommending for prospects? And then the second question is, how do you see the evolution of the ERP space in the AI era?
Okay, well, that's interesting. So the 5 products that we're recommending, or the 5 systems that we're recommending to companies the most?
Yes.
Good question. I'd say it's probably, first of all, I'll say that most of our clients, if I had to pick one technology that is more commonly used by our clients than others, is probably SAP. But having said that, it's because in many cases there's so many troubled S/4HANA implementations out there that we're getting involved during the implementation after the software has already been selected, and we're helping them sort of get those projects out of a ditch. So we have a lot of clients using SAP, but we don't recommend it a lot to non-SAP customers, to customers that aren't already using it. When we're looking at sort of those greenfield evaluations where there is going to be an incumbent change. In other words, the legacy product is not just going to be upgraded. It's going to be a full evaluation with a recommendation of a new product. In those cases, I'd say the most common recommendations we're making, and I don't have data to back this. This is qualitative based on just recently we've worked with 400 clients in the last 7 years. So it's sort of in my head what I think is the top 5, but don't hold me to it. NetSuite is certainly one of them, just because we deal a lot with the mid-market, and there's a lot of mid-market companies that are using NetSuite across industries. Infor, Cloud Suite is a common one too. We're seeing a lot with Epicor because we do so much in manufacturing and distribution and some retail as well, and that's where they play really well. We're seeing a fair amount of IFS, which is especially for our heavy equipment, complex manufacturing, construction sorts of companies or clients, we'll see IFS. I think that's 4. I might have given you 5. I don't know. Those are the first ones that come to mind. And then after that, it's sort of other than those handfuls I just shared with you, after that, it's sort of like a random hodgepodge of other technologies that are specific to certain industries or unique one-off types of situations that we have with clients. But those are probably the most common ones we see. And what was the second part of the question as far as how AI is affecting ERP?
Yeah, how do you see the evolution of the ERP space in the AI era?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that AI is almost another, or it's not almost, it is a new category or another category of enterprise technology, but it's almost another category now that's a potential replacement or a potential alternative to ERP. Certainly, the big ERP vendors, if not all of them, are investing heavily in AI. If they're not investing in AI, they're falling behind. But most of the big ERP vendors that we're working with and recommending and helping implement on behalf of our clients are investing super heavily in AI. And I think the difference, though, is that now buyers have more control or more power to potentially leverage AI tools outside of their ERP, kind of their core back office ERP tech stack. So in other words, you don't have to go upgrade to the newest, latest, and greatest cloud technology for your back office just to be able to use AI, which is what the big vendors want you to do. They want you to say, hey, upgrade to SAP S/4HANA or Microsoft D365, Oracle Cloud, whatever it is, upgrade to that solution, and we will then enable you to use these AI tools. What buyers can do now instead, as an alternate, if they want, is go out there and find AI tools that can operate independently of your ERP system, certainly integrating with and working in conjunction with, but it's not necessarily an AI tool that you need to buy from your ERP vendor. Now they'll try to convince you otherwise, of course, but the reality is you can go selectively choose AI and find AI tools that can sort of bring together your legacy systems and data from your legacy systems in a way that could give you some quick wins and some low-hanging fruit and ways to improve your business and improve efficiency and effectiveness and all that good stuff without having to break the bank by investing a ton of money and investing and taking on a bunch of risk trying to rip out your back office systems only so that 2, 3, 4 years from now you can start to use AI. You can start using AI now, even if you're using old legacy systems. And that's why companies like Palantir, Snowflake, Databricks, some of these, I'll call them alternatives to traditional ERP systems. These systems like Palantir, Snowflake, Databricks, et cetera, are systems that are doing exactly that. They're using AI-enabled platforms to pull together legacy systems to give you some of the AI capabilities and reporting capabilities, analytics, all that stuff without having to necessarily change those back office systems. So there's a lot of options out there. I think AI is just creating not only changes in ERP systems directly, but it's also creating a new category of competition and alternatives for those systems.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And this next question is super interesting as well. It's, if I buy a SaaS software and get the data I need from it, why should I invest in a customized enterprise software that's built to my specific needs?
Well, I mean, that's certainly the ideal utopia, is what this person is saying, is if you can find something off the shelf, out of the box, cloud-based that just does what you need it to do, by all means do it. The problem is that's pretty rare that you're going to find one system that does everything you need. Chances are higher, much higher, that you're going to be posed with a dilemma that you'll have to tackle, which is, do I try to change that software and customize it to something different because it just has deficiencies or things that it doesn't do that we need or want it to do? Or do I go find a third-party bolt-on? Maybe it's a third-party system that does or handles a certain part or niche of our business a little bit better. Or do I, go out and change our business processes to fit the software, knowing that I might be watering down those processes a little bit? Because let's face it, software vendors want you to think, and we all in some ways want to think this as well, but it's not true. We want to think that the software vendors have the best practices, the best processes out there, but they don't. they have a set of business processes and workflows that are great for some organizations, and for some other organizations, it's not as good of a fit. And that's okay. That's not, you're not looking for perfection necessarily, but as you get into the details of your operations and your technology deployments, you're going to have to make those decisions, and they're hard decisions because there's no good answer. There's no perfect answer. You're gonna shift risk from one category to another, regardless of what you do. So it's just a matter of knowing how to objectively navigate that and make sure that you're not resisting standard functionality that you could get from a core vanilla technology. You don't want to resist that just because you're resistant to change in general. It could be that the software could provide you some capabilities that could make your business better and could actually help you, or at least be good enough for you. In some cases, it might be that could be a true statement, but then in other parts of your business, it might be that, well, yes, over here, here, and here in these different parts of our business, that was true. But over here, this is such a unique competitive differentiator for us that we need to do something a little bit different. And we can't just use vanilla software, because if every company's using vanilla software, then every organization would have zero competitive advantage. And in the private sector, especially, that's just not going to happen. So that's the way to navigate and balance it. And that's why the planning phase 0 process is so important, to make sure you navigate and work through those decisions early on, and so you've got clarity as you go through the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great questions from our audience for sure this week. But we're going to switch gears here and get into our first newsworthy article of the day. This one kind of hit a lot of headlines. I heard about it a lot on social media. I'm sure a lot of you guys did as well, but it was Apple issuing their surprise warning about AI, which I think a lot of people did not expect. In this paper, though, Apple revealed that even the most advanced large language models often fail at one of the core tasks we expect of them: logical reasoning. These models sound fluent, but they can't reason through problems like a human would. Secondly, AI is often mistaken for being smarter than it really is. Apple's research shows that the language models often succeed by relying on statistical tricks rather than actual understanding. This creates an illusion of intelligence, especially dangerous when businesses start using AI in strategic or operational decision making. Thirdly, the problem is most visible on multi-step tasks. So large language models frequently fail to chain together steps in a logistical or logical process. That's a huge red flag for organizations trying to use AI for things like financial forecasting, legal review, or supply chain optimization, where one mistake in reasoning can snowball. Fourthly, Apple recommends to find a different path forward. So rather than just scaling up bigger models, Apple proposes focusing on smaller specialized models, improved real-world benchmarking, and then human-in-the-loop systems to guide or check the outputs. And lastly, this is really a wake-up call for business leaders, Apple said. Their message wasn't anti-AI, but it's pro-responsibility. Leaders really need to understand AI's true limitations, prioritize governance and oversight, and stop blindly trusting AI and start to train teams to work alongside it. Given all of that, Eric, a couple of follow-up questions for you. Have you seen real-world examples where AI sounded smart, but it maybe wasn't giving you the best decisions or wasn't doing what you were asking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really interesting study or paper too, as well. It's not what I would expect coming from Apple or any other big tech company involved in AI right now. But yes, I have seen it, and we see it with our clients. We see it ourselves in our own use of AI. There's certainly deficiencies or weaknesses or gaps, what AI can and can't do. The delusions that are often referred to in the AI world, that those are very real, and delusions being something that's inaccurate, it's not true, or it's faulty information, or it's a faulty rendering if it's a generative AI request or whatever. I think we've all, any of us that have tried to create a picture or an AI generated image of any sort. I mean, if you've done it more than once, you've probably had a situation where it didn't do exactly what you wanted it to, or something looked a little off. We use AI a lot, for example, in our like in our short video production, we'll take this podcast, for example, this discussion we're having right now, we'll take it and we'll use AI to sort of chop it up into smaller clips that we can put out on TikTok and Instagram and whatnot. And in that process, it'll create some B-roll footage. And sometimes, we have to watch because it'll create B-roll footage that's AI generated. And if you're not careful, you'll notice things like, a hand with 4 fingers or 2 left hands on the person, or, just weird little nuances like that. And, of course, that's not the end of the world if you have an image and some B-roll that's 2 left hands. But when you're talking about, to your point, business decisions or analysis or information that's required to make a good decision for your business, you want to know that it's accurate. And I do think when it comes to data analysis, like pure data, the non-generative AI side of things, it's just analytics, like, analyze this data or take this information and write a summary. I find that that's it's becoming highly accurate, especially compared to a year or two ago. I've noticed just exponential improvement in at least the AI tools that we're using. So I think it's something to be aware of. I wouldn't be overly afraid of it. I'd be aware and know that it's a risk and know that you need that human intervention. You need that human oversight and involvement still, and you probably will for the foreseeable future. But also recognize that it's better than starting from scratch. It's better than manually doing this all yourself or going back to the human, the more inefficient human way of doing things. It's meant to jumpstart some of that progress, but you can't rely on it to do your entire job. You need to still ensure that you know what you're doing in terms of prompting it and getting the information you want from it. And that part's equally important as the AI tool itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. And another question on that, Apple really says we should focus on smaller, more focused models. Do you think that's really realistic for most small businesses, though?
I don't know. That actually jumped out of all the things you mentioned. That was the thing that jumped out the most because it runs totally counter to my impression or what I thought about AI. I always think of AI, and especially back to your other question earlier about the ERP world, when you think about ERP vendors and their use of AI, I have been thinking, and I still do think this, but now I'm questioning it a little bit. I have been thinking that the big vendors like SAP, Microsoft, Oracle NetSuite, these big vendors that have tens of thousands of customers throughout the world using their products, I had thought that they had the AI advantage because they have such big LLMs and they have got so much data to use to train their AI models. I still have trouble believing that that's not somehow an advantage, but I'm curious to dig more into this thread of, what about the smaller LLMs? Now, I always take it with a grain of salt too, because then I think, well, what's Apple's motive here? Are they trying to disrupt the AI space by making you question the AI incumbents that are already pretty well established in terms of providing consumer and business facing AI tools? I don't know. I don't get the sense that could be the case. But anytime I read a report like that, I wonder, was it commissioned by someone, or is there some sort of bias in it that's getting you to question, your assumptions? But having said that, AI is so new. I think it's worth, keeping that in mind that there are options out there. Does the article say by chance, or do you know if it says if the small or how the smaller LLMs could potentially be better?
I'm not exactly sure. I would have to probably dive into that a bit more on what they say exactly would be better, but it's definitely an interesting suggestion for sure.
Yeah, that's something I actually want to dig into after this discussion, because it makes me wonder, like, why or how would that be a beneficial thing? I could see, there's a difference between saying, hey, I want a smaller vendor because I'm going to get more attention and they might be able to tailor things a little bit more for my needs. That makes sense. But as far as the model itself being better because it's a smaller LLM, I'd be curious to learn more about that. If any of you are AI scientists or a data scientist and you know the answer to that, I'd love to learn from you here in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question, kind of wrap this newsworthy article up. What red flags should companies look out for when evaluating an AI system?
Well, I think a couple things. One is, you mentioned how accurate is the AI tool itself, but I think actually the bigger concern I'd have, or the bigger red flag would be, do you have the internal data and systems to support AI? Because if your AI is completely screwed up and dirty and inaccurate, doesn't matter what AI tool you're using, you've got bigger problems because your data is wrong. So it just means your AI is going to be wrong more quickly and more accurately wrong, if that makes sense. It's gonna be more consistently wrong. So having bad data or having good data is a prerequisite to being able to use these tools. So I think that in and of itself is the biggest red flag you have to worry about with AI tools, more so than the actual AI tools themselves.
Definitely. That makes sense. Well, to switch gears here and get away from AI for a little bit, we're going to actually talk about Rimini Street and how they're extending their support for SAP. So, yeah, Rimini Street is extending their support for SAP ECC and Business Suite 7 through 2040. While SAP plans to end mainstream maintenance for Business Suite 7 in 2027, with the optional paid support until 2030, Rimini Street is stepping in to offer third-party support 10 years beyond that, giving customers even more runway to avoid or delay the move to S/4HANA. This is a direct challenge, obviously, to SAP's cloud migration push. SAP has been aggressively nudging customers towards S/4HANA Cloud, but many aren't ready due to high migration costs, lack of clarity around ROI, concerns about losing control or customizations, and Rimini Street is really offering a compelling alternate path for these businesses. Support includes legal, regulatory, and tax updates. While this isn't just break-fix maintenance, Rimini Street will continue to provide key compliance updates, one of the biggest reasons why companies stick with vendor support. Many organizations are looking for flexibility and leverage, and by choosing third-party support, customers gain more negotiation power with SAP, freedom to build longer-term digital strategy, and the ability to defer migration until tech, budget, and strategy align. Obviously, this is a big move for Rimini Street. If enough customers stay on ECC with Rimini Street support, it could weaken SAP's claim that S/4HANA is inevitable and open up new market dynamics in the ERP world. Eric, I'm sure you have some opinions about this, so I'm excited to dive into this a little bit with you. Do you think this move to undermine kind of SAP's push for S/4HANA and cloud adoption? What is just your overall take on it?
That's a loaded question. We could talk the entire episode about that one question if you want. Actually, I don't want to, so don't make me do it. But no, I think that there's a lot in there. So the first thing I'd say is I love the idea of SAP customers or any software customer. This isn't even just about SAP, although I rip on SAP a lot on this podcast and in my YouTube channel and whatnot, because I don't like the way they're approaching this personally. And I don't like the way it affects our clients. And I don't think it's healthy for the industry. I do think that's all a problem. So I love the fact that companies like Rimini Street are out there offering alternatives, because I think that's what the industry needs more than anything. To me, it's like, free markets, you got a free market. The epitome of a free market is giving buyers choices, and large, medium, small enterprises, they should all be able to deploy technology if and when they want to, not because they're being held for ransom or held hostage because the vendor has all their data and all their applications is housed in this old outdated system that they're going to stop supporting. And if you don't move to the cloud, they're going to stop supporting it, and you're kind of screwed, or you're up the creek. So I love the idea of giving them choices. I think the reason Rimini Street is able to do this, and data backs this is where we do have good data from Gartner and even SAP themselves. SAP user groups, for example, have data that track this. But a majority of SAP customers that are using an older version of SAP, a majority of them have not even started their migration to S/4HANA in the cloud. And that's the problem SAP has. And even though they keep, putting these arbitrary dates out there, these lines in the sand that they keep changing, by the way, it used to be, I think at one point it was 2025, then it was 2027. Now it's 2030 being the deadline that they're giving their customers to move off of the old legacy systems. They keep pushing it out because they know they have to. They know that they can't force Coca-Cola, for example. They're not going to force Coca-Cola to go through a big SAP implementation just because they want them off their legacy system. Coca-Cola is going to win that argument or win that battle. The problem I see is the non-Coca-Colas of the world, the companies like, the mid-sized companies that none of us have ever heard of, where they're a lot smaller than SAP and SAP's got all the leverage. Those are the customers I worry more about. And so, I think there's strength in numbers, though. There's enough of those customers out there that are not taking the bait, which I think is a good thing. And I think that's smart of them not to. Now they have options. Now they can say, well, I don't have to just give up my maintenance and support because SAP is cutting it off. Now I can go to someone like Rimini Street. And it's not just Rimini Street, by the way. There's others. Spinnaker Support is another one, for example. They're based here in Denver, where you and I are based, where Third Stage Consulting is based. So there's options out there. My point being that companies, I think the ones that are taking control of their transformations and doing things on their timeline, those are the smart organizations. The ones that are just haphazardly saying, well, SAP told me I have to move to the cloud, so I'm going to move to the cloud. It's a terrible idea. Don't do it unless you have a really good reason. You have a very clear plan and clear roadmap for how you're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. And one kind of technical question on Rimini Street or Spinnaker or any of those, how do they handle mission critical patches or system failures?
That's a good question. I don't know how exactly. I know they do handle them. I'm not sure how exactly they do. I know we've had both Rimini Street and Spinnaker. I had the CEO of Spinnaker on here on this podcast in the past. It wasn't the CEO, but it was one of the super high executives at Rimini Street has been on this podcast in the past. And I'd love to have them both on in the future to chat about that. But I don't know how exactly they do it. I do know that they do it, though.
Fair enough. One last question. What does this signal about how customers really feel about the cloud the cloud first push?
I think that the industry, and when I say the industry, I mean buyers in the industry, they're finally recognizing something that we recognized, 10 years ago. And I'm not saying that to toot our own horn. I say it because this is something that I've felt strongly about from day one of this whole cloud hype. For a long time, I used to argue with vendors in the space, sales reps and software vendors and ERP consultants that represent those software vendors. I would argue with them about whether or not cloud is cheaper. And the argument used to be, no, cloud is cheaper than on-prem. And then over time, now companies finally realize it's not cheaper. It never was ever going to be cheaper. But that's, that was the sales message that cloud providers started with a long time ago, 10, 15 years ago. So now that message is dead because it's not true, it's been proven, cloud costs you more. Now that in the long term, I should say, cloud is going to cost you more. It's just a fact. Just accept it. It's okay. The question now becomes, well, how do we justify the value? So if it's going to cost us more, that's okay. If it's going to cost us more, great, as long as we're getting the value out of it. So now buyers, I think, need to shift gears and turn their focus to, am I getting the value I need and want out of that long-term investment, which is going to be higher? And if I'm not going to get it, then I should not move to the cloud, or I should go find another cloud provider, or God forbid, I might even stay on-prem and go find an on-prem system that might provide better value. And that's all okay. We have to remember here, there is so much money. In fact, I don't know, I've been doing this for 25 years. I don't think there's anything else I can recall or think of that comes even close to providing this much enticing money to software vendors as the cloud movement. And so the reason being is it's perpetual licenses or perpetual subscriptions. The money goes into perpetuity. Investors love it. It drives up the stock price of these software vendors. Executives get comped on it. I can name not a million, I'm exaggerating. I can name lots of executives at these big software vendors that are comped super, super heavily on how much they can push their customers to the cloud. They are getting comped exceptionally well to move people to the cloud because the investors love it so much. So there's just billions, if not more, of dollars behind this. And so you have to recognize that's what you're up against. And that's what's creating these delusions and these illusions in the space of cloud is better, cloud is great. If you're not moving to the cloud, then you're dying. The reason you're hearing that is because there's so much money behind it. There's so much money to be made. And guess who's making the money? It's the software vendors. It's not you. The software vendors are going to make money no matter what. You are not necessarily going to make money if you move to the cloud. You're not necessarily going to get the ROI. You're not necessarily going to make your business better, but the vendors will win every single time. So I think that's where you've got to say, you've really got to look at the business value and justify it. If you can't justify it, don't do it. Or what's more likely is it's not either or. It's not like either you go to the cloud or you don't. Maybe you selectively move to the cloud, and maybe there's certain parts of your business that you really high value cloud solutions that can really drive some value, but you don't go all in, with one vendor and get locked in and, pay more money than you should. So I think that's the way you've got to think about it, and just be objective, rational, call BS on the sales and marketing messaging, and do what's right for your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easy as that.
Yeah, super interesting.
Super easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, super interesting stuff today. I'm really excited to get into this conversation of a real client example of a transformation.
Yes. It does involve the cloud. It involves ERP. It involves a little bit of AI. It involves a little bit of live entertainment too, because this is a company. It's a global company. It's called Clair Global. They're a client of ours at Third Stage. We recently helped them through their selection and evaluation. We helped them through the implementation, their change management through the process. And so we thought it'd be a good time to have him, or the leader internally at this client. We wanted to have him on the show to talk about some of the lessons learned, the good, the bad, the ugly, behind the scenes, backstage with ERP implementations. That's the whole theme we're going to take on here, is to learn about how this big global manufacturing and construction logistics company that handles they handle all the production behind big, massive live events. So sound, video, audio, logistics, all that stuff is part of what they do. And so when you look at like someone like Justin Bieber, I know Justin Bieber, I'm not a fan of Justin Bieber. You might be surprised to hear that. I'm not in his target market, but he uses these guys. So when I was there visiting these guys a while back, they were talking about how Justin Bieber was on tour, and his big massive world tour they were the ones that did all the stuff that you saw. Other than Justin Bieber himself, everything else was them pretty much at these venues. So that's what they do. And so they needed an ERP system to help them scale and deal with all the growth they were dealing with. And we want to talk about kind of the slow motion replay of what happened, what went well, what could have gone better, and what are some of the lessons of that. So we're going to have him on the show here in just a moment. And then later in the show, we will talk about we'll actually share with you a keynote presentation that I did recently at a conference talking about cybersecurity and whether or not your company can survive a cybersecurity attack. So we'll get into that here as well later in the show. So we've got a lot more to cover. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola.
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 227. This is the tech agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including people, process, technology, strategy, all the stuff you need to know to be successful in your enterprise and technology initiatives. We've got a fun guest for you here that's going to join. It's a fun client, fun industry, fun project. We're going to talk about some lessons from this particular client. The company is called Clair Global, and they produce the logistics behind some of the world's largest live events and tours. And they're a global company. Recently, we worked with them to help them evaluate different ERP options. We helped them implement their chosen ERP solution. We're going to get into all that here and talk about some of the lessons learned from that implementation. So with that all being said, I wanted to introduce a first-time guest to the show. His name is Seth Morth with Clair Global. So with all that being said, Seth, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me, Eric. My pleasure.
Yeah, great to have you here. And first of all, before we jump into some of the questions I've got for you about your recent ERP implementation, tell us a little bit about, first of all, tell us about Clair Global, and then I want to ask you a little bit about you and your background, not only what you do at Clair, but what you've done leading up to Clair. So tell us about Clair first, if you don't mind.
That's a lot. I've been here 21 years. I think the first thing I want to say is there are 5 other people, key people I want to say thank you to, and they are Amanda Mull, our corporate controller, Corvin Oberholzer, who really managed the implementation for what is our construction line of business, more on that in a minute, Kate Serb, our procurement and supply chain big boss, Alec Fouts, who is one of our software engineers in our IT team, and Mike Dintz, who is moves and shakes in our product manufacturing group. So that's a light introduction on key people in the organization. Clair Global has 3 key lines of business worldwide. We support live events, whether it's IT networking, audio, video, and lighting. The heart of that is audio touring, but since the 90s, the organization's changed and grown worldwide to bring in pretty much anything that's fan-facing. System integration is something that we've been doing for a long time. I think it started in '89, and that started out similarly. People wanted that premier audio quality system, and we installed it. And that also has grown to be IT networking, audio, video, lighting, rigging, whatever people want, gigantic LED walls, and all sorts of venues worldwide. And the third final line of business is product manufacturing. And that is for external sales to customers and to support our system integration line of business, as well as to support our live events business. We use the speakers that we make and some of our other IP, and we also use speakers that are common in the industry, as well as a whole host of other technology. So my role in the organization currently is to make the organization more organized, for lack of a better word. That's my elevator pitch. That's like the door. But it's been an interesting project. Changed my title into it because we knew it would be a multi-year adventure. And so officially I'm the solution architect, which is what it started out as. I'm the Seek and still am doing. It's like I had a kid. It'll always be my kid. And so I have answers to questions even now that people just like after we've been using it now for 4 or 5 months, I'm the one with the answer because it's my kid.
Right.
But then as the project moved on, became the project manager and change manager. And there's, oddly enough, the solution architect, what my title is, I don't think maybe you know better than I do, that there's a certification out there for somebody who wants to go for it. Cool.
For solution architect?
Right?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
right?
Be
But
good.
project management, I got my PMP, and then I think you had Tim on with ProSci. I got my ADCAR certification. All of those during the project as well, and I hope to get my CCMP soon when I have a
So,
moment to sit for the exam.
so you've got certifications plus battle wounds in the line of
Battle
fire.
wounds, yeah, but it's more of I've been with the organization for 21 years, and so in various aspects of it, and I know a lot of the people, and I knew a lot of the people. I know a whole lot more now, especially worldwide, but I was able to relate to them because I am one of them in whatever it is. I can talk about using a handheld palm router to somebody in the wood shop. The CNC machine's a little squirrely. That's a bit unique, but I can talk at least about the operating system they're on. Touring is an easy conversation to have, and the system integration, that's the chunk I started out with and was worked through for 15 odd years.
Yeah. So of the concerts that Clair Global has been involved with, or the artists or the tours that they've supported, do you have a favorite, like one that you personally just that was your favorite performance, or that was your favorite concert that Clair supported?
Ooh, so it's hard to have a favorite, but I would say that U2, who's a long-standing client of ours, what they did with 360 was top-notch production.
Yeah.
That wasn't that was nothing to sneeze at. Like, that was a big deal in the industry and for us, and it was very um, cool if you went and you saw it. There are other things that I've done that kind of blur the line, where when I was doing system integration, I think probably my favorite project was out of our Nashville office in 2010. The Cumberland River flooded Nashville. Grand Ole Opry got, and it was like water above the stage there.
I
We
forgot
were
about
part of the refit of the Grand Ole Opry, and so I was there at the first broadcast when they came back, and they maintained their broadcast. They went off somewhere else, but when they came back, and that was just like, poof, that was a heck of a thing to see and witness.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. So did you guys do the not to get too far down the rabbit hole of rock and roll and music, but it's hard not to, and given what you do, and given
Sure.
the fact that I love music too. And with you two, did you guys do the Zooropa tour? Do you remember
Yep.
the like back in the
Absolutely.
90s? Because I
Yep.
remember
That's
going to that. I was in college at the time, and I remember going to that show. And I wasn't a huge U2 fan at the time, but that show just blew me away. Just with I still remember all the multimedia stuff, which at that time was very unique.
right.
I mean, now
Yeah.
it's the ante's been raised quite a bit, but that's pretty cool that you guys did that.
Yeah, I've been through any number of seating locations in the company, and I think 1, 2, 3 people ago was Steve McHale, who was, I believe, monitor mix engineer for that portion or that leg of the tour, if not the whole tour. He'll have to forgive me for this. And oddly enough, Chad Schreiner, who's managing our service organization and was also, I can't name everybody, we'd be here all day, um, led the charge on our ERP implementation, focusing on service. He also worked that tour. I'm quite certain of that. He was a long-standing U2 tech.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's really cool going to your office in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, out in the middle of nowhere.
Right?
Just a big, huge campus where it's really cool. I mean, you've got these, what do you call them? The practice
Yep.
performance
Yep.
areas
We
where you
have
set everything up, and the artists actually come to Lidditz, Pennsylvania to trial or to pilot the setups, right? That you guys will kind of mock set up a venue
yeah.
for them, and they'll come to Lidditz and perform just to test everything out. Is that how that works?
Yep, that is exactly how that works. So we have two large studios here, and uh, give you a bit of a plug for it. Nashville has a similar campus opening this October with equal number of big studios, and I think even more small studios because Music City. But each of the larger studios is able to hold an ice rink, easily hold an ice rink.
Wow.
So there, it's not just a mock-up or a pilot. Like, it is the real thing. Like, it is no different than if they went into some branded uh, arena, wherever it might be. And you can also get pretty far into simulating what would happen in an arena as well. And
Yeah.
there's it's not just rock and roll. It's kind of funny where it was Wells Fargo Center or whatever it's called. They test hung the new LED scoreboard in one of the studios because it's an arena. So it was just pretty interesting that they did that, and then they moved it to the actual arena and then put it in for real.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of eye opening to see not only the breadth of artists that you guys have worked with over the years, but also just what goes into creating these tours. I mean, it's pretty fascinating to see. And actually, before I ask you my first question, kind of shifting gears a little bit, I want to come back to the audience here. I'm going to flip the screen here real quick and just share some of the comments. We've got Emerson joining from Cape Town, South Africa. Thanks for joining us to hear.
Cool.
Tiago joining from Puerto Rico. I did ask, and I hope I'm saying it right. It's either Thiago or Tiago. I'm not sure if the H is silent or not. From Puerto Rico, so I apologize for that. But your favorite show is Rammstein, which
okay,
so
right, yeah,
some heavy stuff there. I like it. I'm more of a Motorhead guy myself, but that's okay. And then let's see. Emerson says that his favorite was Cape Town Jazz Festival with Andreas Vollenweider.
Vollenweider, yeah.
Vollenweider, okay.
Yeah.
You must know that performer.
It's a key anchor in the history of electronic music. We'll just.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I did not know that. Interesting. Tyler is joining, says that joining from Bettendorf, Iowa. Best concert is Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers circa 1999. I think I went to that actually at Red Rocks in Colorado, which is another cool venue. So anyway, curious to hear where the rest of you, what the rest of you think your favorite concert, your favorite performance that you've ever been to. And then we can even compare notes and see if it's a Clair global client, a client of yours. But just to get started here, Seth, kind of shifting gears back into the world of ERP, you don't typically think about music, entertainment, et cetera, and ERP technology. It's almost like you're taking something super cool and sexy and then bringing in ERP. And when I say super cool and sexy, I'm talking about rock and roll and music, not ERP. How do you, it's kind of an interesting contrast to talk about something like rock and roll and then enterprise technology. What, like if we back way to the beginning, why did you guys come to this conclusion that, hey, we need to not only be this, do what we do as far as producing these shows, but we also need to think about ERP technology, back office technologies. What was it sort of led you down this path in the first place?
Right. You raise an interesting point there. Yeah, the business is alluring, right? There's lots to captivate people, but in the background, it is logistics. You've got to get the stuff there in time and all the stuff and have it all work so it happens. So for us, from what we need to do to support our live events, the closest thing we have as a talking point is the military. It's a lot like that. For us, the ERP we actually put in place, it's not all consuming, but key things for us were our financials worldwide, back office accounting, and then fiscal management of the entire organization, as well as procurement and supply chain to feed what is the ERP or the inventory management program that supports operations. So we have two big things working together, and we've snuggled them up with each other. The prior system was a little clunky and left a lot of gaps and lots of frustrations. But we also saw that as much as it couldn't support what we were doing now, it definitely wouldn't support where we've been headed as an organization and are going. And as painful as it was, we're thankful that we did it.
Yeah. So how did you, if we go to the very beginning, how did you start the process? So you've got this need you've identified, there's a pain you're trying to address. What did you do to get started on the journey?
First thing I did was actually stabilize what we had and finish what we could of the prior system we were using. It wasn't deployed with like a full project mindset, and there were just things that were incomplete or frustration, open-ended aspects of it. So dialed in what we could and stabilized it so we had a framework that would sustain us while we went on the path. into the future. And from that, I learned a bit about what we needed as an organization. Um, that's that's really what started it all. And then as we worked through the path, it it was, well, how do we find what we need? And that's where after a bit of analysis paralysis, we called third stage.
Right. Tell us about the analysis paralysis, and then of course I'll ask you about calling third stage. But what do you mean by that? You guys just were spinning your wheels, doing tons of research, not knowing where to go, or kind of how did that
I think
transpire?
everybody knew what they wanted as individuals. There wasn't really a good collective about we need it as an organization, other than what I was trying to build up, which people were coming around to. Um, but it got to the point where if we talked with a vendor salespeople, that was the best conversation we had just had. And so as you talk through them, it's, well, then the others, and we had gotten to the point where there were some disqualifications, uh, but we were hemming and hawing, and we knew we did not know the full landscape of available options, and we also knew that we didn't know and wouldn't really be able to find out more than what we were able to superficially find until we got into it. We
Mhm.
figured we could make almost anything work, but that's uh, I mean, which honestly, it's all software, right? You probably could, but it is, how easy would it be to make it work, and then what would be the thing that would be the fastest to stand up for us, and those were big drivers for us.
Yeah, yeah. So then you call third stage. We come in and help you through the evaluation and selection process. Tell us how that went, if you don't mind. Like, is what short list did you start with? What did you end up selecting?
We I think we went through like a dozen that seemed to do it, because we were looking for something that would handle worldwide financials with unique financial aspects of each of those three lines of business. But we also were looking for something that was able to effectively do construction projects, which is actually fairly tricky,
Mhm.
and being pretty darn good at manufacturing, if not great at it. That was probably the easiest portion of it, because when we got into the accounting, you couldn't talk about the accounting without talking about the finance and the reporting and all of that. So to have it all work harmoniously, uh, we didn't want to get boxed in. We got down to two final selections, and we invited them to the campus, and we gave each one of them 2 days to sit us down and do some dog and ponies. And that was very telling. In some of the presentations that happened were, yeah, either really PowerPoint heavy, or what we liked more was, well, show us the thing working. And so perhaps uh, if somebody had shown us on one of the other ones the thing working better, we would have taken a more positive view of it. But when that's not happening, you really do need to ask yourself, why aren't you doing that?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you actually showing me a thing? And it got pretty aggravating at some points for some of these vendors. There was one of them, and I'm a smart guy. I told him, well, could you click on that search and type this in? And he's like, no, 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 it's a PowerPoint slide, because the whole thing was in PowerPoint. I'm like, I'm not here to buy PowerPoint. I already
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah, especially with nowadays with generative AI, I could create a mock-up of a screen without having any software behind it, you know?
Right.
So you want to know that it's real, and that especially now with these uh, cloud, these cloud upgrades or these migrations that the vendors are making to the cloud, you want to make sure that you're seeing what's actually in production and actually working, not just what they think will be on the
Yeah.
roadmap in the
And
future.
and cloud, like, I cannot tell you the number of times I held up my phone and said, it's got to get on this. The prior application was terrestrial, and for good or bad, we had to spin up servers and make sure VPNs and blah blah blah, and our wide area network, which wasn't really horrible, but it wasn't a friendly mobile experience. And they have a web app, and I'm like, ugh. But it's been a very interesting decade, I guess, in ERP, and you've seen this far more than I have, with things going to the cloud and people saying, "Oh, we're cloud," and I'm like, my little spiel is, now that I've seen it and lived it, it is anything that's terrestrial to get to the cloud, it goes through a big old stack of fog first, and working
Yeah.
through that fog and cutting through it to see what that future state of something being in the cloud is something you need to watch out for. And there were applications that we looked at, or programs or ERPs that we looked at, where it was a stack of applications, and you go here, like menus on the left, menus on the right, menus on the top and the left, and you're like, gah. Whereas what is, you would think, an indicator of a more harmonious back end is when there's consistency in the UI and user experience. Then you, maybe there are different modules and apps in the back end, but it's not as frenetic, and it's much easier to learn and teach. And for us as an organization, um, most everybody has many hats on, but working through an ERP system, unless you're like, I don't know, like a top 10 bazillion dollar company, you don't have one person on one screen. They typically go to several screens to do their job. And if somebody was going here and it just, you knew they were working through different apps, was just hokey.
Yeah, yeah. So what were the 2 finalists that you considered when all was said and done? You looked at close to a dozen, narrowed it down to the 2. Who were the 2, and what'd you pick?
The 2 finalists were Oracle Cloud, or ERP Cloud, I think is what they call it, and IFS. And we chose IFS.
Okay, great. And then what did it come down to? When you made that decision to choose IFS over Oracle, like were there, a couple or a handful of not deal breakers, but things that really put them over the edge that said, hey, this is why it's a good fit?
We believed that they could execute, and that we would be able to take a certain degree of ownership of the platform, and be able to customize is a mini splendored word, but be able to sustain ourselves and work with it into the future. And looking at IFS, it is that uniform UI and user experience, meaning that we dug in, and there's not COBOL databases in the background with big blobs you can't get into, and it wasn't a sequence or a collection of various apps that we'd have to decode and try and get to work. It's like, no, it's just IFS, and you can get to work. Sure, it's a cloud, so it's database to interface stuff for our data migration, but we knew we would be tangling with that, and that was all right. And the fact that we were able to have an effective conversation with them about what we wanted to do was really pretty helpful to us. We felt understood, and like I said, it's like we had to have a very unique business. They did their best to understand it and show us things that we wanted, but also they were very deep and knowledgeable in the project side.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you look at some of the unique nuances of your business, as far as you talked about construction and manufacturing and financials, global financials. I mean, those 3 right there, those 3, especially all 3 together, that kind of eliminates a lot of options right away. And then I imagine that that's a big part of what it came down to, was you need a solution that could sort of specialize in that, in those nuances that you guys do with construction and manufacturing and logistics and
That's right.
everything else
Yeah.
you do. Yeah, very interesting. I want to come back to the audience, just a couple audience questions or comments here that I haven't gotten to yet. Apparently, I didn't realize you had a fan base, or I didn't realize how big your fan base was.
Oh my gosh.
Laura,
I was like, you told me like you should post this on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh man, if I do that, like what's gonna happen? But yeah, Laura is she was a backstop for Amanda Mull, who I mentioned, and is a key player in our worldwide accounting team, and has been and it's just a pleasure to work with, and a very effective team player, like everybody. But really, like Laura and the others I've mentioned, anytime I mention a name, these folks are capable of having a conversation I cannot keep up with about how IFS works internally, and it is amazing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, Laura, and I'm excited to learn more about this fan club you have going here. But Emerson made a comment here just as a follow up to a comment you made, Seth. Absolutely like military and training, and I suppose the logistics side of what you do in moving materials and people and logistics throughout the world. I mean, that's a pretty big undertaking that could strain your enterprise technologies, I would imagine, if you don't handle it right.
Sure, absolutely. And actually, lighting on to that last word there for training, uh, for us, our director of IT, Benjamin Stroughton, had a great vision of how software should work. And there are things that he's always happy with, and there are things that were frustration points with any software. It doesn't matter, his phone, his car, whatever. He is a software engineer. What our approach was for this project was wipe everything away, build it up from scratch as much as possible to recreate what we would be experiencing in go live, so that when we cut over, it is as short as possible. We're an active organization. We're constantly adding customers. We're constantly adding suppliers. Work in progress. All of those things and the data migration. And yeah, we had this old system, but there were 24 other things that we brought into IFS as well. So there was a massive effort, and we basically changed it all over in a weekend. And it was Jen Schreiner, in our receptionist there. She kept us fed and watered, and we were able to survive. But it was a worldwide effort. And there were some staggered things where we deliberately said, okay, you can come in, next month because of this thing. And I've learned so much about international tax. It's not even funny. But it was a very interesting time.
I can imagine. Yeah. So it wasn't as simple as choosing the software. That was the hardest part. Now we just have to worry about implementing it. I'm guessing that's not what you're saying. You're saying implementation was challenging and interesting. What would you say your biggest challenge was? If you had to pick one thing that was like, this is the one thing that either you didn't expect or was more difficult than you thought.
I'm going to say that the surprise to me was more of an epiphany when I realized that it was a business project and not an IT project. As soon as I made that mental little adjustment and I changed how I was interacting with the team, things got better. They were never perfect, but you're much. I was able to have a clear vision of how to get from where we were to where we were going. And it's like, IT, happy to help. Fantastic set of database administrators and software engineers, great, but they don't know the data. They don't know how the data would be used. But also, and fun times, policy, processes and procedures, that's business. IT's like, what do you want it to do? You got to tell us. So we did that. We got that group of people to help get everything in order, and then cross-functionally all work together worldwide. And like, remember to talk to Australia, remember to talk to Germany, remember to talk to Switzerland and the UK. And it was, whew. So yeah, it was a lot of effort by a lot of people. But I'm kind of thankful I don't have to wake up at whatever Euro clock in the morning to talk with Europe and end my day talking to Australia at whatever in the evening. There were some long days in there for everybody. Great team worldwide, but it was, we hadn't done a large business project like that before. And we've done large IT projects, but they were always managed as IT, like almost in a silo. And we have good cooperative working arrangements with everybody, but to have it be an actual business project and make sure that you're actually working with the organization to build something that is better for the whole organization is a monumental task, especially if the organization is growing both organically and inorganically. Fun times.
Yeah. Was there so what led you to that epiphany? Were there mistakes you made along the way, or the times you stubbed your toe, or saw certain challenges that made you realize, wait, this isn't just an IT project, this is business? I mean, was there some tipping point there that made you come? Because a lot of teams we work with, a lot of clients we work with, it's not, they don't realize it soon enough in some cases.
Sure.
It sounds like you were able to affect the outcome of the project by recognizing that early on. What led you there?
It was third stage, and it was something that we have not spoken about, where we extended our scope with third stage for change management. And it was Atia Akbar saying, hey, like, who are your business leaders? And I had already I knew who the team was, and they've been part of the selection process. But then it was like, in that moment, I'm like, it's a project, like, sure, but it's actually a program. So each of these folks, Corvin truly was, he took on project management of the portion to integrate for our construction line of business. But the others also had to do that as well, just in wrangling and communicating with the people, the project management and the change management side. I scheduled a lot of things. I did lots of meetings, some like 1,200 meetings.
Wow.
But, and by the way, yeah, get organized when you do this. It's like I have a log of them. It's actually 1,158 the last time I counted, and that's
Of meetings you had?
transcripts and summaries and recordings and all that. So
Wow.
if it was talked about, I got it. There are a couple hundred I missed, but you need to be organized. But as you work through this, I wouldn't expect any of those folks to manage a project. I help them, but it wasn't until I brought them in for what they truly excelled at, which was, hey, the current policy, how does that work? Could it be better? And then how do we leverage IFS in its standard functionality to help us do that thing? That's the hard part. It's not, and this is where it could be any ERP. It's like, well, how do you use it to do that? Until you know what that is that the business needs, you're not going to have a successful project unless you are incredibly lucky. Keep the door open for lucky, but do not count on it.
Right. That's really interesting, and I'm glad that you shared that, because it's helpful to hear that sort of the contrast between how you treat it as an IT project and versus what you need to do in terms of treating it as a business project. We're here with Seth Morth. We're talking about lessons from an ERP implementation at Clair Global. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Tell me what you've got to say. Tell me, I've been waiting for so long to hear the truth.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
I want to invite you to join me and other thought leaders in the digital transformation space to Stratosphere 2025. It's an annual conference we've hosted now for 7 years in a row. It's a great event. It's live in Denver, Colorado, but we're also offering it virtually via hybrid tickets. And we're going to have a lot of different speakers here, including myself as a keynote, as well as others that you may know from the industry. And this is a perfect conference if you're interested in any sort of digital transformation, including ERP and CRM and HCM. And actually, the theme for this year's session is AI, and how AI is affecting all different types of digital transformation. But in addition to AI, we'll also talk about the fundamentals of digital transformation, including program management, evaluating the right software, digital strategy, change management, process improvement, all the things you need to know to make your project successful. It's also a great way to network and learn from others. So just being part of a community that is also like-minded and going through the same things you are, that's another value. And you can join, like I said, remotely, in person, and you can also buy VIP tickets if you'd like more exclusive access to me and others from the Third Stage team and other speakers that are going to be there. So I hope to see you soon. Check out my discount code below for discounted tickets. You can go to stratosphere2025.com for more information, including the full agenda, and I hope to see you there.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 227. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, and we can help you with your digital transformation journey as well. I've included my contact information below if you'd like to learn more about how we can do that. I'm here with Seth Morth. We're talking about lessons from a recent ERP selection and implementation that we worked on with him. Let's jump back into the conversation. There's a question here I want to pull up from the audience. This is from Darian on LinkedIn. And Darian says, how did you balance global standardization with the highly localized on-the-ground needs of the teams around the world? You were just talking about how you would talk to UK, Australia, all these different locations of Clair throughout the world to get them involved and make sure you gathered their requirements and that the implementation was going to meet their needs. But was that a challenge? And if so, what did you do to balance those two things, the need on one hand or the want to potentially have one standard common set of processes versus the localized needs of the local markets there?
Leverage and the standard functionality of IFS as the baseline of what we want to do. If there needs to be unique or regional specialization, great. But the software itself as the starting point, we have some corporate policy in how we handle certain transactions. That's another thing. But the HMRC module for tax reporting in the UK, great, have at it. It's really cool, awesome. But the rest of the world doesn't really need it. So it was put that highest common denominator in that we possibly could using the standard functionality, and then be like, okay, can you guys adjust to meet here, or is this something that is truly unique and we have to do this really strange way? For the most part, it is all standard functionality. I'll say we have 70 very light modifications from, say, UI or adding a column here and doing some light formula work, a couple major integrations, and the 28 to 30 customized reports. But compared to some that I have spoken with where they've done thousands of these little modifications, I think we did exceptionally well. Not that you don't want to modify to suit your needs. You absolutely need to do that. But if you can leverage the thing as it is out of the box and then put all of the work on the vendor, for their base thing when there's these upgrades, especially with cloud, keep it current. Um, and you don't have to test and work through all these customizations. It is huge, and you don't see it, you don't feel it, but it is a pain that you don't have to live. Where we have seen is where we have done some customizations, we've actually had some level of impact and discussion with IFS, and you can't do everything all at once. And the world's trying to do AI, and AI wasn't on our bucket list, but it's in everything. It's pervasive. But working through things, it is our hope that in the coming years, we'll be able to unwind some of those customizations that we did and just leverage the standard functionality. Sure, we'll have to unlearn and relearn and teach people this new way, but there is a lot of it that's like, why aren't you doing this now? And yet you talk with them and they're like, oh, okay. So we've had some pretty interesting conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And here's a sort of a related follow-up question from Darian as well. Were there any moments where the team felt stuck or defeated, and how did you push through? And maybe even just expanding that a little bit more. Were there times where the morale dropped off? Maybe they didn't feel defeated, but maybe they started to doubt the viability of the product and its ability to do what you guys needed it to do, or doubted whether or not you were actually ever going to get to go live. Were there times like that, and what'd you do to overcome them if you did?
So I'll say that in our industry, employee mental health is a big deal in the live events industry, and not just the ERP project. I'm talking about like the frontline folks out in the field. And so it is a big part of our culture to actually listen to our employees. And me as a project manager, um, I knew that they would not all thrive every day during the project. That's not how it works. But I dang well made sure they were surviving. Um, it's those high profile projects that we work on, those high performance is an expectation of what we put out as a product, and the inside of the organization supports it. So they all know what is going on. The show must go on sort of attitude. And the culture of the company revolves around supporting that kind of work. Um, I'd say we broke even, like strategy eats, well, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think it's actually the phrase. Everybody welcomed having a plan and structure, but it kept changing. So I had to keep educating as things progressed. But as long as I told people what was going on nicely enough, and as long as we kept things somewhat cooperative and professional, there was no kicking and screaming fest. That's just not us as an organization. Um, People were able to adjust, and it it was this is more of a change management than it was project management, but to get everybody in the organization working together and realize that they weren't alone in it. Like I like if I saw somebody working on something and I'd see that they're on our chat thing late at night or emailing, I I let them know, hey, I saw that. It's like, do you really need to be doing stuff that late at night? It wasn't something I would say, but I would let them know and acknowledge their work, and that make them feel that they were not alone in it as much as I could. Um, but it was like that throughout the organization, and it's just this quantum mechanics level of individuals to all the other individuals, all those communication networks. And you can make broad statements, but it's down to individual interaction to build up anything that is effective. But if any one of those individuals is out of alignment or is having problems, it could cause difficulty for others. And so you just need to be aware, and you need to be sensitive and know that you need to challenge your team, but you shouldn't be abusive of them. You need to support them. And that's something where I'm quite sure our software engineers view me as a drill sergeant. And there are others that will create memes about me being from like a TV character in the Office television series.
Which
But
character, by the way?
I don't, well, I think it vacillates. So there are some favorites, and it's never one I would pick.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Um, so there's a lot to it, and I'm exceptionally proud of our team. Like they put so much time and effort into it, and convincing them to do so wasn't difficult. Um, that because they had a certain level of PTSD from the prior system. And
Mhm.
remember, I brought in the business side. They saw that they could be a key element into the future success. That was a motivator I can't do. Like their pain motivates them to put in something that will work for them in the future. But it doesn't change the fact that it's a lot of work. And it was a functional matrix. Myself and one other, we had the time. Everybody else was still doing their day job. And so for just about everybody, you're changing over an airplane to go from using propellers to using jet engines while it is in flight.
Right.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of moving parts for sure. And it's not like you can slow down the core business or set things aside in your day jobs. You've got to keep doing your day job and figure out how to do this in parallel. How did you handle the resourcing side of it? I mean, was that I assume, like we were talking right before we went live here today, we were talking about how is there a company out there that
Oh,
has a bunch of people available just sitting and waiting for this ERP project?
yeah, dare to dream, right? It's it comes down to really risk management, but it's not that there was some that we were able to mitigate or actually transfer onto others. Like we leveraged our implementer more to help us in certain areas when we saw that it was something that they could take and run with. But there's a whole big chunk of it. We just say risk accepted, and we just dealt with it, and it was like, yep. Um, it's and I mentioned my broadcast background, like true broadcast, like towers and transmitters and stuff. And if a plane's going to hit a tower, a plane's going to hit a tower. It can be broad daylight, it can be nighttime with as many lights on it as you want. It could be lit up like the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. A plane will hit it if it's gonna. What's important is, do you worry about the plane hitting the tower, or do you come up with some basic principles and basic plan elements that you can use when a plane does hit the tower? And that was something where we got very creative,
Hmm.
and I tend to plan ahead. So I never really get it that far out of whack that it compromised anything. But there were times when we just said, hey, we need exactly that, more time. We wound up from our initial go live date delaying from October uh, 1, or actually, I think it was September 1 to October 1, and then we punted to February 1. And still, all things considered, I s- I view that we got everything done ahead of schedule because we had such an aggressive timeline. If we had let our resources completely dictate our timeline, um, we'd still be doing discovery. Like
Right.
it was a big project. But our team was ready for the challenge, and they rose to the challenge and the occasion. And you just support your team and you tell their boss, hey, this person's doing really good. And our team was very good, and we have a healthy organization where somebody needs to disappear for a bit or like back off. It's cool, I get it, right? Do it. They have to take care of themselves, they've got to take care of their family. If they do that, everything else does fall into place.
Yeah. What what was an example? Just to back up for a minute, you talked about how if a plane, the metaphor that if a plane is going to hit the tower, the plane is going to hit the tower. It's more a matter of how you respond to that. Can you give us an example of a situation during the implementation where the plane hit the tower, so to speak, or you accepted the risk, knew that it was a risk, and then the risk transpired or materialized into a problem? Can you give us an example of something like that that happened?
Sure. I'd say there was we did not descope everything as well as we should have across our implementer and us internally and the software provider at the beginning of the project. And we got backed into a corner as far as data migration is concerned. And I realized that there were a lot of people all around making a lot of assumptions. And I shot up a flare. And we had not a we had a quite an interesting conversation or two about it, but it wound up being that we uh, awarded more scope to our implementer to help us through the data migration. And we backed out some things that we thought we could do because, hey, why not? Into no, these are things that we know what to do with and we will do. And these are things that, you know what, you guys have got it. We'll feed the beast. Let us know what you need. So that was one of the earlier ones that happened in the late fall of 2023, spring of 24, and it changed our approach. That was one of the ones where we transferred the risk onto our implementer to help us with data migration. There were certainly more that we could have done because data migration is just like it's just like how detailed do you want to be? But what I have seen for us is we're almost always dealing with simple sets of data going into more complex structure. That was true for us in this, and it's also true in other things that I've seen that we've done. And it's whatever the new thing is, it's typically more complicated, supports more information that interacts in a more complicated manner. It's just the way of the world. So it's always this one to many relationship. There were a couple things that went back the other direction, but I didn't really even clue in on that until like maybe after all that brouhaha middle of last year. It's like, oh, right. So this is one of the things where when it comes to a data migration approach, it is, do you map out all of your current data, or do you map out where data should be in the new system? Ultimately, you need to do both. Because if you just try and use the data that you have, you're recreating your current state in a different piece of software sometimes. Like you're self-limiting.
Yeah. Yeah. Just turning to the audience here again. Ard is joining on LinkedIn from the Netherlands. Thanks for
Yeah.
being here today. And then this is from Sanjay on YouTube. Sanjay says creating risk mitigation metrics for pain points from stakeholders lands well in final outcomes. So did you, just out of curiosity, did you identify or use your stakeholders and business users to help identify some of those risks and some of those potential challenges along the way?
Yes, there's always there are always questions about like, hey, how do we execute this policy? Or will the people be able to adapt and understand that? That was something from that business to team level. From above, the stakeholders in our executive team were very supportive. They wanted to see specific things. And at certain times they took a back seat because they knew that the project wasn't ready for them. And there were other points where I had to bring them forward into the project because the project needed them. And there were other times when the project was just ready for them to get engaged and do their thing. What really drove us was our CEO. It was a project that he is a big supporter in, and it sounds simplistic, where the metric of success is a happy CEO, but it's true in that he wants to get out of it what he needs out of it to make business decisions that he needs to make. Great. What he also does not like is a whole bunch of people complaining to him, just in general, but also about a piece of software, especially if they spent as much time and money and resources into standing it up as we did. So is that person, if they're complaining, what's the actual story there? Is it actually that, hey, we do have a system problem or a policy problem or a procedure or a training problem? Or is this person just using it as an excuse? But ultimately there is something there that needs addressed. But if the CEO can get what they want out of it, and the rest of the organization isn't complaining anymore, I guess, and organizations normally complain, then hey, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah. If If there was any one thing you could do differently looking back and you get a chance to have a mulligan or go back and do it all over again, what's that one thing you learned that you thought, you know what, I wish we would have done this a little differently?
Yeah. You say that as like one thing would have made all the difference. Uh, Almost having closed out the project, I'd say we're about ready to start the project and do it well. There's just so much there, and I've seen this before, not just here, but just in all sorts of things, where any number of things that I would pick, all it does is open up bold new ways for failure that I could only dream of. And it's a different world now. Like all that AI stuff, the cloud is more advanced, and everything is different than 3 years ago when it started. I would say though that I would have tried harder sooner to get the business involved further upstream and really formalize that and take what I have now from project management structure and like a streamlined charter and gotten that buy-in from
Mm.
key people earlier than we did and from the executive team as well, and really tried to make sure that as we were progressing, there was better communication with the rest of the world to continually get their input and make them aware and keep them trained. Like there was just a lot, but as the organization, I don't know if that could have really happened though, because all that was it was changing in the organization as we were going forward, and it's as we grow, it's wow, the what you pick for a solution 1, 2, 3 years ago, by the time you get to 3 years later, your organization is different. Like you cannot, nobody has the same exact people doing the same exact roles with the same exact titles. Like maybe they do, but you have to continually adjust your vision to fit. And so now that we have a much clearer view of what that end state vision is, how do you bring that back 3 years ago to when we started to say like, hey, this is what we're going to do to get us there? I would have looked more like a lunatic, careful choice of words, had I gone around trying to explain some of these things to people back then, because they're like, oh, we don't do that, or we won't need that, or all those sorts of other things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. What kind of along the same lines then, what's the one, and I know there's always more than one, right? I hate to box you in like this because I know that's in some ways unfair to make you pick one. But if there's one or two pieces of advice you'd give to someone who's about to start this journey themselves, what would those couple, handful of piece of advice be?
Um, I hope they're wearing sneakers like I am. Run away. Like when I was like, that's it. That's not really feasible for everybody, but it's when I was the solution architect and the project manager and the change manager, I knew what I was signing up for. That I'd be dealing with 70-hour weeks for however long. If that doesn't scare somebody off, prepare thyself. During the project, got a PMI, PMP. During the project, went through and got ProSci AdCar. Get them now. If you're even talking about it, get it now. It will help you. Whatever it is, the change management world is vast. The project management world is vast. PMP or Prince 2, either one, you're awesome. The ProSci AdCar I lit onto because it gave us a good way to understand the change at the individual level. And it had a method. It wasn't just a theoretical. The other thing is I mentioned the 70-hour weeks and the three things. I didn't get everything done. So it's always an awkward conversation. Why aren't you using third stage now? Well, this is the stuff third stage said that we needed to do. And I agreed with. But out of the resource and bandwidth, we were only able to execute this. And Tony Ford himself, the great Tony Ford, said, I'm a broken record, man. Like, If you guys can't execute, and I just keep telling you to do the stuff, this is the definition of insanity. And the same with a TA for change management. If we had deeper resources, if I was just the project manager, if I was just the solution architect, if I was just the change manager, we would be in a whole lot better position than we are now. But there are only so many hours in the day, and there's always a priority to what needs to be achieved on any given day. I wake up, I'm like, I'm gonna go in the office and I'm gonna do this. And from checking my computer over my cup of coffee to turn it on at the office, boom. Well, I guess I have a different day today. And
Right.
it was like that every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. And I appreciate the shout outs to Tony and Atia and our team at Third Stage. But if it's any consolation, we run into that a lot where we know what the client should do. They many times even know what they should do. But the reality of running their business in parallel with going through a project like this doesn't always lend itself to it. But to your point, I mean, I think a really good point you made, and it's sort of an underlying thread in a lot of your responses throughout today's discussion, is you're talking a lot about preparation, or you're kind of alluding back to what can I do up front to prepare for this? What certifications and training and education can I get now? You talked about the project charter and the project governance, getting executives bought in, getting the business involved, recognizing that this is a business project, not an IT project. The more of that you can do up front, I suspect, in your case, that might have made things even easier if you had a lot of that done up front.
Yeah, if you have and in the continual organization change that we do, it's like now I have all sorts of organizational process assets. I had to build up communications things to do what I needed to do. If there's any sort of something that your director of communications is doing, if you have a change management department or CMO or PMO now, if there are things that they want to do to help communicate or execute their projects better, if it can help a little project, it's going to help a big project. If you can get to the whole organization to do something, anything together, then that helps set you up for success to do something that is even more important for the whole organization when they all truly do need to work together. So it is, if your organization isn't project ready, and everything's very reactive, you're going to have a much bigger battle, an uphill battle, than if your organization is adaptive and maybe used to change. They may not like it, but can they get through it? Do they understand who all the players are worldwide in their organization? It's an ERP, like it can be worldwide, and for us it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. So where do you go from here? Sort of what is your what are you working on now? What's your roadmap for the future as it relates to your enterprise technology and overall change initiatives?
I'm going to continue making the organization a better organization, and I have a stack of projects that I want to execute, or things that we need to do to help support that, like internal communications and how we all work together. Continue to enhance and grow what we've created from this little digital transformation that we've done. Uh, and we'll see where the future holds. The organization is growing, and that as it grows, that creates new challenges, but also it allows new avenues that weren't there before. You find the word synergy gets bandied about a lot, but it was okay. Well, what can we do now that 2 years ago, 3 years ago wasn't on our strategic roadmap because we just weren't able to do it as an organization.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting for sure. I mean, none of us are sitting still, but you guys are growing quickly and have global operations. The entertainment industry is constantly changing, which I imagine affects you. Technology is changing in the multimedia space, which I imagine affects you as well. So staying on top of all those changes, plus doing all this enterprise tech stuff in the background and all the change stuff in the background, it's a handful for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Seth. Great conversation. Appreciate you being here today. And thanks to the great audience questions there. We've got a lot more to cover. We're going to dive into some follow-up and debrief on some of the takeaways from the conversation with Seth. And we're also, after a quick break, going to get into whether or not your company can survive a cybersecurity attack. So we've got a lot more to cover. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 227. My name's Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. If you'd like to learn more about how to collaborate with us on this podcast and other content that we produce, be sure to reach out to the contact information below. I've tagged that Major Tom contact information below for you. So, Darian, we just had Seth on the show. We talked about the recent ERP selection and implementation that we were involved with this particular client. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from the conversation?
Yeah, I really liked Seth's honesty about, the burnout side of a project, communication gaps, and then the limitations of a one person trying to do everything. He also described having over 1,000 meetings, but still making sure people are feeling seen and supported. So I thought that was really cool, and showed really what people first leadership looks like in a project like this. Some other things I really liked was the metaphor of the changing a plane from propeller to jet engines mid-flight. I think it perfectly captured the pace and the chaos of an implementation in a growing organization. And then one thing I thought was really insightful was how he admitted that looking back, they're only now ready to start the project right, which I think is really insightful compared to maybe where a lot of leaders sit. So definitely have some follow-up questions for you. One thing that he mentioned was that the turning point came when Third Stage expanded the scope to including change management. From your perspective, when is the right time to bring in change management support? And how do you convince execs that it's not just a nice to have?
Yeah, great question. And I picked up on that too. He talked a lot, not just about change management, but other things in the project that he sort of realized or started to address midstream. And he mentioned a couple times that those were things that he thought or would recommend going forward, or if he could go back in time, he would recommend doing that earlier in the process. He also talked about, I just remember his hand gestures. He said, you told us to do this and we ended up only being able to do this because of resource constraints. And that's okay. I mean, that's just the reality of, working with consultants. I mean, we're always going to have a utopia vision of how you should be running your business. But at the end of the day, you've got to run your business into his use his metaphor that you just brought up, you are changing the jet engine in the middle of a flight, and that's not easy, and you only have so many resources to do it. And, we always advise our clients on what we think they should be doing, but inevitably they're not going to be able to do everything perfectly the way, even if they know they should be, they can't always do it. So that's where you get into prioritization and saying, well, if we can only do 10 of these 20 things, what are the 10 that are most important for us to do, and what's going to have the most value and most impact? So I think that's the biggest thing there is just knowing that, yes, you should take the time up front to do this, but I think the more time you spend up front planning and accepting risk and doing some of the things he said, I mean, he talked about how there were some things they said, yeah, we know this is a problem. We know this is a risk. We know we're not addressing it. And we know it might come back to haunt us, but they also recognize that if that does happen, here's what we're going to do. He talked about the metaphor with the planes crashing into the radio towers, which I thought was a great metaphor for this, because, you can't plan for every possible contingency, but you can at least be aware that it could happen. And if it does happen, here's what we're going to do. So I think that getting all that stuff out on the table early on, making those deliberate decisions, and then also having your risk mitigation, your contingency plans, all that stuff laid out up front is going to make life so much easier. Because when you stumble into those issues, or even worse, let me back up. When you stumble into realizing that it could be an issue midway through a project, a lot of times it's too late to do anything about it. And what's even worse is when the risk actually materializes out of the blue and you didn't expect it, didn't even think that it could be a possibility. That's the worst possible scenario to be in. So you might as well just get all that stuff out on the table up front. And the more you do have that up front, the easier it is going to be to navigate. It's not going to be easy, but it'll be easier than if you didn't expect it or didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one more question from this conversation. Seth made a point kind of towards the end about post go live being the real start. How do you structure, support, or optimize plans for clients who think the hard part ends at go live?
Well, a lot of it is thinking beyond one single go live and recognizing that, okay, you flip a switch, you go live, but there's a lot more to do after that. It's not, even if you hire third stage and we're there with you all along the way, you do everything exactly the way we recommend and advise you. There's just going to be somewhere along the way some suboptimal results. Something happens that doesn't reflect the full potential of what you could be getting out of your implementation. And so that benefits realization, value realization phase post go live is really important, because it's super easy. It's low cost, low risk type stuff that has a huge amount of value. And it's little things. Usually it's little things like, oh, we didn't turn on this one module or this one feature in the system. If we just do that, it's going to clean up a big part of these problems we're having. Or, the small work group over here is critical to our operations, but they weren't trained in how to do something differently, or they're not doing it right in the system. So let's go clean that up. Doing that sort of cleanup is so much easier, especially when you've just gone through all the really heavy lifting and all the really hard, painful stuff. It's almost like you did 95% of the work and then you quit. Why would you quit? We'll just do that extra 5% and get exponentially more value and exponentially less pain out of the system. That's the way you've got to frame it with companies going into these projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, super great conversation, though. I always love hearing directly from clients themselves and all the different things they've learned.
Yeah.
And are still learning.
Yeah. That's what I loved about his conversation is he was pretty candid about what he learned along the way and pivots he made, mistakes he made, changes he made along the way. So that was a super interesting conversation for sure. So loved having him on, loved having the audience questions as well. So we're going to shift gears. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into cybersecurity and how to know whether or not your company can survive a cybersecurity attack. I'm going to play you a keynote presentation that I gave at a recent industry conference, and we'll play that for you, and we'll chat about it here in just a moment. But first, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. So I'm going to play you a clip right now from my YouTube channel where we just released this recently. It's a recording of a presentation I gave at a industry conference, and it's talking about cybersecurity and whether or not your organization can survive a cybersecurity attack and how to create resiliency behind your cybersecurity efforts. So let's roll the clip here and let's roll the presentation, and then we'll come back and chat about it. Just to start, I'm just curious, have any of you had, within your organizations now, have any of you had any sort of major cybersecurity breach? Wow, it's actually more than I thought. So a little over half of you have had some sort of cybersecurity breach. Does anyone want to share a war story?
But they had a ransomware attack and actually took their data and they wanted ransom, but they did not go forward with that. They ripped down the bare bones and built back up again from our backups.
Okay. Was this an ERP system, financial system, or what was the
Whole our network.
Oh, okay. And is it like, so hosted yourselves on-prem? Okay. So that's a good, unfortunate case study of the risk of cybersecurity. How long did that take you to sort that out? Not you, but the organization.
We were back running in 2 days, but the analysis said it came from a clipped email that somebody had gone through. But I think it took about 2 days to get everything back up.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 days of chaos and disruption.
2 days we lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And then anyone else want to share a story in the back here?
It was our engineering server, so it wasn't anything that hosted Ep227. We only keep our solid version on engineering servers. Ransomware.
I mean, there's some good lessons in both these stories. I mean, one is, you talk about on-premise and the fact that it was an email phishing sort of cyber attack. You talk about even with third-party IT support, which presumably I would assume they're somehow monitoring your network, your systems to watch for that sort of thing, and it's still happened to you. So sounds like you had the right preparation or the right idea in mind, and that's what we want to talk about today, because I think a lot of organizations treat cybersecurity as a reaction. Once we have a challenge or a problem, then we'll solve it, we'll fix it. And when you mentioned AI too, the advanced AI aspect of it, and I think that's a whole nother thread that you just opened up there with third-party systems in general. When you've got AI and other bolt-on legacy systems, whatever, those are all loopholes or areas of exposure and risk for cybersecurity attacks. So when you're going through an ERP implementation, if you're implementing Epicor or any other system, you can count on Epicor to have solid cybersecurity hosted in the cloud, but they can only do so much. And they can only manage a certain part of cybersecurity risk. And there's a lot more to just what Epicor would do, what any software vendor would do. A lot of it's internal, and a lot of it is related to your own integration of systems and the way you train people. And there's definitely a human component that oftentimes gets overlooked in this whole thing. So that's what we're going to talk about today is cybersecurity resilience, what you can do, and how you can be thinking about cybersecurity as you go through your Epicor or any other sort of ERP implementation. How many of you right now are in the process of implementing Epicor or another ERP system right now? I assume Epicor. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't Epicor, I assume. But is anyone implementing now? How many of you are using Epicor now? Okay. So you're all post-implementation. How many of you are on the most recent version in the cloud, pretty well up to date? Okay. Okay, great. So a little over half of you are on a modern version of Epicor in the cloud? Okay. Most of you in the cloud. So that's a solid start, but that only gets you so far. Epicor can't control everything you do, everything your people do, everything your IT department does. They can control their applications and lock that up or tighten that down, but there's a lot more to it, as we'll get to here today. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about myself, just a quick introduction, which I pretty much already did. We'll talk about the cyber risk landscape in 2025. We'll talk about what cyber resilience is, and then we'll talk about how to build a resilient enterprise to guard against cyber attacks, and then we'll get into some case studies and best practices at the end of the presentation here today. So just real quickly, my background is I've been doing ERP implementations for about 25 years. For better or for worse, it's all I've ever done in my career. Ever since I got out of grad school, I started as an ERP consultant doing big, massive, gnarly SAP implementations back the first 2 or 3 years of my career. And then throughout my career, I realized that there was a need for more independent voices and advisory services within the ERP space, because it's a pretty well-oiled sales and marketing machine that we work within in the ERP space. So I felt like there was a lot of bias and a lot of blind spots in the industry. And so that's why I wanted to start a company like Third Stage. It was truly independent. We work closely with Epicor. We work closely with all the other vendors as well, but we're not affiliated with them. We don't get paid anything. I'm not getting paid to be here today. Epicor has never paid me anything for anything or any recommendation or anything like that. Sometimes we recommend Epicor, sometimes we don't. They understand that that's the price you pay, or good or bad, of having an independent consulting firm like us, but that's our whole vision, is to be an independent tech agnostic voice of reason for our customers. And so the beauty of it is not only being vendor independent, but also looking at the whole big picture. Because we're not focused on just one system like Epicor or any other ERP system, what it allows us to do is really look at the whole landscape of your entire digital strategy, your entire technical landscape, including the non-technical aspects of people and process and strategy. So that's a big part of what we do, is really focus on being independent, but also looking at the whole big picture of what's required to be successful. A lot of the work I do is related to expert witness as well. So we do a lot of expert witness work when there's a lawsuit related to cybersecurity, or more often it's a failed implementation. Although I will say I have yet to testify in any court case involving Epicor. I don't know if that's just because I haven't seen them or if they don't exist, but it is a good data point for me because I've done just about every other system out there, either on the plaintiff or defense side, providing expert testimony to those different parties. So there's a lot of good lessons from some of these failures when you see these extreme failures, or even just hear the case studies that you two just shared today, which thank you for spilling your guts related to your recent cyber attacks. But you learn a lot from those case studies. Like seeing and hearing someone who's actually been through it, seeing what the consequences are, it becomes a lot more real. It's not just a cool PowerPoint deck that I'm going to show in front of you today. It's actually something that people are living day to day, as we saw here today. What I want to do today is start off by talking about the cyber risk landscape in 2025. If you step back and look at some of the recent, well-known, well-documented cybersecurity attacks, there's been a number of them. You have Oracle Cerner just had a major cybersecurity attack, and they're obviously a software vendor. They presumably have world-class IT security to manage their hosted cloud solutions, but they themselves had a cybersecurity attack. So that goes to show, for example, that even vendors aren't 100% immune to this problem. You also have there's another smaller ERP vendor called Smart ERP, and they had a recent cybersecurity attack as well, where they got access to customer information and financial information and sensitive confidential information that was hosted on their systems. So those are just a couple examples of technology companies that have had issues with cybersecurity. And then, of course, retailers and the credit card breaches and others that are hosting sensitive customer information. Those organizations are bigger targets. There's a bigger bullseye on companies that have a lot of data, which for a lot of you as organizations, you probably have a lot of sensitive information, but imagine you times however many thousands of customers might be on the same hosted cloud platform, which makes it an even more appealing cybersecurity attack if I'm a hacker or someone that has nefarious intent, which I'm not a hacker, by the way. I'd be a terrible hacker. But that's some of the challenge for organizations. So even if you're a widget manufacturer, you're not a well-known brand, you still have vulnerabilities and you still have to be aware of what some of the challenges are. I assume, the two of you that shared your case study, I assume that there's better known companies out there than you. Are you one of the better known Fortune 100 companies that everyone knows about, or are you a lesser known organization, just out of curiosity? You can tell me your company name or not, it doesn't matter, but so you've got a niche, you're a leader in your niche. Would the average household know your name? Okay. Point being that even no matter what niche you're in, no matter how under the radar you are, you still have information that's valuable to cybersecurity hackers and vulnerable to attacks. And there's a lot of different types of cybersecurity attacks too. I think a lot of people think of it as a hacker is going to hack into my system or send me an email and I click a link and that's going to take down my systems. That is a real threat, but the bigger threat and the more common threat is the stuff that goes under the radar that's sort of behind the scenes and internal. It's that third-party legacy app that's hosted on-prem that hasn't been updated in 20 or 30 years with any sort of modern technology or cybersecurity protocols. You integrate that legacy system because you have to keep it. Maybe it's regulatory, maybe it's a competitive advantage, whatever. You integrate that system to Epicor or any other ERP system, and people realize I don't need to go after the Epicor software. I can go after that third-party weak link in the chain, attack it there, and get to the Epicor data. So that's an example of how just your own internal IT department could unintentionally create cybersecurity risk. Another risk, which is potentially even bigger than that, is your employees. And I'm not talking about employees that are trying to rip you off or steal information. I'm talking about people that just don't realize what they're doing when it comes to setting security profiles or having super user access to all these different functions and applications. That open access is a common challenge, and oftentimes that's the root cause of cybersecurity breaches. So in other words, you're putting your data at risk, even if it's not an outside hacker necessarily coming in and intentionally attacking your system. It could be your internal people that are unintentionally and unknowingly putting your information at risk because there's such open access to data and information throughout the application. And this is a really tricky one because when we're going through implementations, one of the big service offerings we provide is change management. So the people side of things. And a lot of times you come in with the intent like, hey, let's get as many people involved as possible because we want to build ownership and buy-in and make sure we test the system thoroughly and all that good stuff, good intention stuff. But what the conflict there is, by giving people more access and giving super user rights to all these different people so they can help test the software, help design processes and all that stuff, you've opened up more cybersecurity risk. So we've got a conflict here. Do we want to involve people and have that sort of buy-in and involvement, or do we want to tighten up security and lock things down with the zero trust sort of policy? And those are two conflicting things that there is no right answer. But you've got to find that right balance to make sure that you're considering both. And obviously, if you go through a implementation process, like many of you have, it sounds like recently, you go through user acceptance testing, training, and all that stuff. When you go live, that's when you can tighten things down, even if you had broader rights for people during the implementation. But the problem is most people don't go back and fix that stuff. They implement it with open access and access to more information that people actually need, and that creates problems later on in a post-go-live production environment. And by the way, one thing that's important to note is that second to last bullet here, which is this isn't just an issue of taking down our information or having privacy issues or leaking confidential information, which alone is a big deal, but it's also about just your overall operations. I mean, these cybersecurity attacks can take down your systems entirely to where you can't ship product, you can't take customer orders, you can't close the books. All that stuff is at risk if you have a cybersecurity attack. So the consequences and the disruption and the cost of cybersecurity attacks is a very real and materially expensive, risky thing that organizations face. So when we talk about cyber resilience, it's about how do we build that cybersecurity mentality within our environment, whether we're in the middle of an implementation or, as in the case of most of you here today, you've already implemented an ERP system like Epicor. And there's 4 pillars of cyber resilience. You have the prevention, which is sort of playing defense and trying to put the policies in place and the protocols in place that will prevent the cybersecurity attack in the first place. But then you have to do additional defense, even more defense with detection, and then ultimately going on offense with response and recovery. So you want to have a clear policy and a clear set of processes in place when a system does go down. I know in the back you mentioned that the third-party IT department provided some of that detection and response sort of help, but ideally you prevent it in the first place. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is that we can prevent first. But we also have to have policies and processes in place if we don't succeed 100% of the time in that prevention, in those prevention efforts. And it's pretty reasonable to assume that most organizations are going to have some sort of cybersecurity breach or issue. So you have to have those processes in place, even if it's a small percentage chance of it happening, which I'd argue it's actually probably bigger than most of us think. But even if it is small, you still need to have the process in place so you can recover as quickly as possible and bring your systems and your operations back up as quickly as possible. So we talked a little bit about ERP systems and how oftentimes the ERP system itself isn't the issue, especially for most of you that are on a modern version of a cloud system. You've got probably tighter cybersecurity than you've ever had in many cases. But that's just one part of the equation, and that's just one link of vulnerability or potential vulnerability in the entire chain. So when you look at potential integration or even lack of integration between multiple systems, that's an issue. How many of you are using some sort of third-party bolt-on to Epicor in your current use of it? Okay, half of you, roughly, almost half. Those third-party systems, how many of those would you say are on-prem or homegrown, outdated types of technologies that you're bolting onto Epicor? Okay, so a little less than who originally responded. But that's a vulnerability right there, and that's probably the bigger risk than Epicor itself or your core ERP system. It's going to be those small little niche bolt-on systems that you built to do some custom workflow or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish with it. And then there's also lack of user training and internal controls. A lot of times people think of segregation of duties as a Sarbanes-Oxley thing, and if you're not publicly traded in the United States, it doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily need to have segregation of duties in the same way a publicly traded company would. But segregation of duties is something that's super powerful from a cybersecurity perspective, because it enables you to tighten up the process to where people have clear roles and approval thresholds and things like that, to where the same person that creates a vendor can't then go pay that same vendor, for example. So if I work for you and I have access in your ERP system, if I created a vendor called Eric Kimberling LLC, and then I turn around and pay Eric Kimberling LLC $1 million, that's an example of a cybersecurity breach, and something that you really want to make sure you tighten up and understand what people's roles and responsibilities are. And again, for those of you that are super focused on the human change management side of things, it may sound like something that's good to give people open access and flexible processes and open transparency to data. All that stuff is well-intentioned, but then you have to look at the dark side. What does that do from a cybersecurity perspective to potentially put that data and our systems and operations at risk? And then every vendor you work with too, if you have any third-party vendors in addition to your core ERP system, those vendors, you've got to rely on them to have the same cybersecurity protocols and controls, and it's the weakest link. It's the one that doesn't have the tight protocols and controls in place. That's the weak link, and that's where your real exposure and risk is. Even if the rest of your systems are completely locked down, all it takes is that one system to bolt on that does not have the same cybersecurity thresholds. So to build a cyber resilient enterprise, there's a few things that you can do, and especially now, post-implementation, you've already invested heavily in your ERP system, presumably. So what can you do now? You've already got the system in place. The protocols are what they are. Epicor's got their cybersecurity protocols. You're probably not going to change those or have much influence over that. But what can you do as an organization? What can you do to protect the things outside of your core ERP system? Well, first is to conduct a digital risk assessment. So really looking at where are the vulnerabilities and understanding what the risks of each of those vulnerabilities are. So really that overall assessment of your current systems, your current landscape. And this is a hard one for a lot of organizations because they implement an ERP system and they're just glad to be done. They're glad to go back to their day jobs. They sort of forget about it. They set it and put it on autopilot to run the company, which is what you want. But at the same time, you've got to go back and look at where could we optimize and where could we improve. By the way, not just cybersecurity, just overall business value. That's a whole other presentation that I've given before, but we'll set that aside for the time being and talk about cybersecurity being one piece of that. There's also cyber hygiene best practices, making sure that you've got proper tests and controls and training and all the stuff that goes into making sure that you as an organization are well aware and conditioned and trained to follow best practices as it relates to cybersecurity. And then also, as I mentioned before, strengthening access management. So making sure that you have clearly defined user profiles, clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and the way you build their user access and user rights. That's a big, important part of cybersecurity. Again, has nothing to do with outside hackers. You're talking about your own internal people, and we all want to assume that our people are great people, and they probably are. But it's those accidental mistakes. It's that one weak link that can create a bigger problem for the entire organization. So having the governance, backups, and maybe backups aren't as relevant in today's day and age, especially if you're in the cloud, but certainly the data governance is really important. What do we do with our data? How do we protect it? By the way, how do we comply with international privacy and data privacy laws? Because if you're operating in Europe, for example, or in the EU, there's pretty strict GDPR rules there around how you protect data and data privacy overall. And then also making sure we've got a system architecture in place that supports cyber resilience and supports our cybersecurity risk mitigation efforts as well. So just to give a couple of examples here of case studies, I talked about Oracle Cerner and how they had a breach. Smart ERP had a breach. Target was a recent example where a bunch of credit card information got stolen off their systems for millions of customers of Target. And those are just a few examples. I mean, there's all kinds of, it seems like every couple of weeks you hear about a big cybersecurity breach of some sort. And these are all big companies too. These are the ones you hear about. These are the well-known organizations that presumably have world-class IT systems and departments and resources at their disposal, but even they have issues. So that just goes to show that even the larger, more sophisticated, more mature organizations on the technology side, they still struggle as well. And so we can't prevent this stuff 100%, but we can put the controls in place and the processes in place to at least minimize the potential risk of those sorts of attacks. So we talked about a couple really good these that are probably better than these, but I'll share a couple more than in addition to what you both shared at the beginning of the presentation. One example is a manufacturing company that was hit with a ransomware attack during their ERP upgrade. And that's a really vulnerable position for a lot of organizations, is during the implementation process, because you're moving data around, you're opening up access, you're trying to figure out how the system works. There's not a lot of full understanding of the system yet and the consequences of some of the decisions you're making, because you're working through all that during the implementation. So that's a particularly vulnerable time, especially when it comes to data, potential data breaches. But in this case, during the upgrade and shortly thereafter, they had a 3-week shutdown, loss of production, and also some data segmentation. They had offline backups, layered recovery protocols, et cetera. So that's what they did to solve it, was to put those backups and recovery protocols and data segmentation, the segregation of duties, the defined roles and responsibilities, and user access. All those things were done after the fact, but again, that was very reactive. It was in reaction to and response to a big attack that brought down their operations for 3 weeks. The idea here is, let's figure out where we could possibly have an issue. Let's also quantify the impact of that issue, by the way. If you were to have a cybersecurity attack, what would that cost you? What could it cost you? And oftentimes that will put it in context for your executives and your leadership team to understand the importance of in these cybersecurity protocols and controls and whatnot. And we see a lot of these, a lot of companies come to us when they're in the middle of an implementation or after an implementation. They'll ask us to help them optimize their use of the system and getting more value out of the systems. And oftentimes what we find is there were cybersecurity issues, and oftentimes that's a pain point they're struggling with, and that's why they end up calling us to come in oftentimes to recover an overall system implementation. Another example is a retailer that had a breach with a supply chain partner. They had data leak of customer records, and what they did to resolve that was vendor risk management and zero trust architecture. So that zero trust architecture is a big buzzword right now in the cybersecurity world, which essentially means you're going to start with not trusting and then find exceptions to why you wouldn't trust someone to have access to information or data. And that runs completely counter to what we were talking about before. When you talk about this from a change management perspective, we're all about being agile and open and transparent, providing access to information and visibility, all that good stuff that creates excitement and buy-in and productivity and all that great stuff. So we've got to figure out how to balance those two, because by doing that, which has very good intentions, we create another dark side or another risk that we've got to deal with. And it may be that we're going to continue to do that and operate in that way, but we've got to have something behind the scenes or on the back end to clean up any potential risk that comes from that mentality and that focus on handling things from a more effective change and openness and transparency perspective. So some ways to build that long-term resilience would be to build cross-functional ownership across IT operations and overall leadership. It is something that needs to get the attention of your executive team if it isn't already on the radar. This is such a big issue, and again, especially if you're operating internationally or you're doing work for the government, there's just a lot of risk you have, and you're more exposed in those environments too, to not just the disruption and the cost to you as an organization, but also any regulatory breaches too, by not having the right policies and the right protections in place. Training and simulating regularly, so simulating what a cybersecurity attack could look like, and even trying to conduct a test cybersecurity phishing campaign or whatever the case may be. That's something that our IT department at Third Stage does. Is they'll mask themselves and create another email, and they'll try to see who clicks on the link, on the fake link, which obviously isn't going to do anything because they're just testing it, but they'll watch and see how many people click on this link. And then they'll tell us, they'll say, hey, here's how many people clicked on this one link. You should be aware of it. Here's something we need to inform them and educate them on. So that's a way to think about it, is just constantly be looking at different creative ways that you could possibly be trying to fool your people. I know it sounds weird to say, but you're trying to fool them, and that's where the learnings come from. And you'd rather have them respond to a fake phishing attempt or a fake cybersecurity attack than a real one. So you might as well do it yourselves and get it out of the system and understand where those weaknesses are. Making sure that as you go through your IT strategy in general, you've already got your ERP system in place, you're probably doing other stuff, assuming you're not sitting still and just rolling with technology as it is today, you're probably constantly changing and improving what you have. And if that's the case, and even if it's not the case, you should have a cybersecurity strategy that's tied into that and really looking at how can we tighten up our cybersecurity protocols, especially if you have some of those vulnerabilities I've talked about, then you're at higher risk and you should probably spend even more time and effort and resources on that as part of your IT strategy. And then also looking at independent advisors. And yes, this is a shameless plug for Third Stage Consulting and independent advisors like us, but having someone that's independent that can look outside of just one system and look at your entire landscape and understand how that all ties together and where the risks are is very important. Because we're not just looking at things from an ERP or an Epicor perspective, we're looking at it from an overall digital and IT perspective for your entire business. So some ways we can help, and if it's not us, these are things you can do to help prevent these issues. Doing a risk assessment and gap analysis and understanding where our risks are, where the gaps are in terms of what we're doing today, what best practices are, and what the risks and the potential costs of that disruption and breach might be. That's one thing you could do to get started. There's also having a secure architecture design and roadmap. So understanding that, hey, if we've got this on-prem system that's super outdated and doesn't have cybersecurity protocols, it might be working fine for us right now operationally, but maybe we should think a little bit harder about replacing that system too. Not that we need more reasons to spend money on technology, but that is a pretty good one, especially if you've got that homegrown legacy system that's been rock solid for all these years and decades. That's probably where the biggest risk is. And so you've got to start thinking about how can we move that system to something that's more modern and with cybersecurity protocols for today's day and age. Having vendor-neutral implementation guidance can help too, just making sure you find the right solution for different parts of your operations and technology. And then also change management and user enablement. I talked about how change management and cybersecurity are oftentimes in conflict, but when you put them together, you can actually use change management as a mechanism and tool to improve your cybersecurity, because the more we can educate and train people and understanding what their actions result in, unintentionally potentially, the more visibility and understanding they have, the more aware the organization is going to be, and you're mitigating a lot of risk just by addressing the change management and user enablement component of that. That was the presentation I gave recently at an industry conference talking about cybersecurity. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation, Darian?
Yeah, I thought it was a great conversation that you had. One thing that I really found interesting was how you really highlighted that many organizations think they're protected, but the real risk often comes from outdated systems, user access, and integration blind spots. So I have some questions to kind of follow up on those things. One thing you mentioned was that the most modern ERP platforms like Epicor have strong built-in cybersecurity, but that's only part of the equation. Where do you see the biggest vulnerabilities for organizations today?
I think the biggest vulnerabilities are internal. I mean, you hear about the big, outside attacks on big companies where credit card information is stolen or social security numbers are stolen. That's, bad stuff. None of us want that to happen, but that's not the most common problem. The most common problems and the bigger threat is going to be within your own four walls. Not even necessarily because you have criminals working for you, but because you have people that don't necessarily understand cybersecurity or don't necessarily understand data privacy, or, what happens when I install this one application that has access to all this data, and all that data has been locked down super tight within the core system, but this one bolt-on I put in place doesn't have the right security protocols. It's stuff like that. It's human error, it's human mistakes, oversights, not understanding cybersecurity. Those are your biggest risks, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing that you walked through was like the 4 pillars of cybersecurity, which are prevention, detection, response, and recovery. Which of those do you think companies neglect the most in their cybersecurity plans?
I think prevention, just because of the human piece of it that we were talking about. I mean, a big part of that prevention is training your people and making them aware. If there's only one thing you do from a cybersecurity perspective, that might be it. I mean, that might be the one I pick, is just make sure your people, anyone who touches your systems, anyone who could potentially impact your core sensitive data, make sure they're aware of, cybersecurity risks and what they can do to tighten up the cybersecurity profile of your organization and your systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one last question to follow up this. If a company has already implemented their ERP system, but they're realizing now that their cybersecurity may be weak, what is the first thing they should do?
Well, I think doing a cybersecurity audit is the first thing. You think you may be weak, but usually your instincts are going to be onto something. But then the question is going to be, well, A, is it true? And B, what is true about that statement that our cybersecurity is weak? And C, what specifically can we do to fix it? So I think doing a cybersecurity audit is probably the quickest, best use of time and money when it comes to cybersecurity, because that'll give you a roadmap it'll give you an understanding of the problem and the risks. And it'll also give you a roadmap for how to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was a great speech by you for sure, and definitely a lot of information there for businesses.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I hope the audience enjoyed it as well. I hope the audience enjoyed this conversation or this episode. Really appreciate Seth being here. Appreciate you being here today, Darian. Appreciate the audience questions. And again, new episodes of this show will be released every Wednesday. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to keep up with upcoming episodes. You can also go to that same website to see and listen to all the past past episodes of the show, all 227 of them. So go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to check out all the past episodes that you might have missed. You can also subscribe to the podcast at that website as well. So hope you have a great week. We'll look forward to seeing you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.
Ground control.